He woke up early as he did every morning, feeling the quiet of the empty house settle around him. The room smelled faintly of the night before, and he could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. For a moment, he just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how everything had changed. The bed felt too big and too cold without her there beside him. The pillow where she used to sleep was still soft with her scent, and he closed his eyes for a second, wishing he could reach back in time and hold her again. He pushed himself up and rubbed his face with his hands. Feeling the roughness of the morning stubble, the first thought that came to his mind was about the day ahead. There were bills to pay and groceries to buy. There was work waiting for him that he could not avoid, and a little girl downstairs who would wake up any minute looking for breakfast. He sighed quietly and swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling the floor cool against his feet. The hallway was quiet except for the soft sound of his daughter moving in her room. She was still little enough that every morning she stirred in her sleep, making small noises that made his heart ache with both love and sorrow. He opened her door slowly and peeked inside. She was tangled in her blanket, hair messy from sleep, lips parted as she breathed softly. He crouched down and kissed her forehead gently. She stirred and opened her eyes, blinking slowly. "Good morning," he whispered softly, and she yawned, stretching her arms up above her head. "Good morning," she replied in a small voice that was still sleepy. He smiled at her tiny hands and the way her eyes lit up for just a moment before the heaviness of the morning took over again. Breakfast was simple, cereal and milk with a side of fruit, but he watched her eat and felt a strange sense of pride. She had survived another night without her mother, and somehow she was still cheerful, even if just for a little while. After breakfast, he cleaned up the dishes quickly, moving with practiced efficiency. The house was small and quiet, and every sound echoed in the emptiness. He had become used to the silence, but it was still something he noticed every day. He went to check the mail and found a few letters and bills. One of them was from school, a note about his daughter needing some supplies for the upcoming term. He stuffed the envelope into his pocket and shook his head. Everything seemed to cost too much, and he had to figure out how to manage it. He remembered how things used to be before she died. The house had been filled with laughter and the smell of cooking and late-night talks about nothing and everything. Now it felt hollow, and every corner reminded him of her absence. He tried not to think too much about it, but sometimes the memories crept in uninvited. The way she used to hum while making breakfast, the way she tucked the blanket around their daughter at night, the soft voice that could calm anyone even in the hardest moments. He swallowed hard, feeling the lump in his throat. He got ready for work and glanced at himself in the mirror. The reflection looked tired but determined. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his shoulders slumped slightly, but there was also a strength there. He had to be strong. For her memory, for his daughter, and for himself. He knew that life had moved on whether he liked it or not, and he had no choice but to follow along. The thought made him both anxious and resolute. Walking out the door, he locked it carefully, making sure everything was secure. The small garden in front of the house had flowers that his daughter loved to water. He glanced at them and smiled faintly, thinking of the times she had run out into the sun with a small watering can, laughing as the water spilled everywhere. Those memories were both painful and comforting. They reminded him of what was lost, but also of what had been beautiful. The walk to the bus stop was quiet. The street was empty at this early hour, except for the occasional neighbor heading to work or walking a dog. He kept his eyes straight ahead, hands in his pockets, lost in thought. He noticed how the sunlight fell on the pavement and made patterns through the trees. For a second, he felt something light stir in his chest, a sense that life might have more to offer, even if he did not yet know what it could be. At the bus stop, he waited with other commuters. Everyone was busy with their own thoughts, headphones in ears, eyes on phones, or staring blankly into the distance. He wondered how many of them had stories of loss or longing hidden behind polite smiles. The thought made him feel less alone in a strange way. Everyone was carrying something. And maybe that made the world feel a little less frightening. When the bus arrived, he stepped on and found a seat near the window. He watched the city go by as he thought about what needed to be done at work. Reports to finish, meetings to attend, calls to answer. It all seemed so mundane compared to the life that had been, yet it was important. It kept him going. The bus rattled along the streets, and he found himself staring at the reflection in the window. His face looked weary and lined with fatigue, but there was also determination in his eyes. He reminded himself that he had a job to do, a daughter to care for, a life to continue living. At work, he was efficient, as always. He moved from task to task, answering emails and making phone calls, attending meetings and making sure everything ran smoothly. Colleagues chatted and joked around the water cooler, but he mostly kept to himself. Sometimes he smiled politely, sometimes he nodded, but mostly he stayed quiet. He had learned over time that it was easier to keep his thoughts inside. The world did not need to know the depth of his sorrow. Lunch was a quiet affair. He ate at his desk, watching people outside laughing and talking. He thought of how different life had been just a year ago. She had been there, always ready with a story or a joke or a word of comfort. Now the chair across from him was empty, and every bite of food reminded him that someone was missing. He sighed quietly and tried to focus on the work in front of him by mid-afternoon. He felt the familiar weight of tiredness settle over him. The office hummed with activity, but he felt separate from it all. He thought about his daughter and how she was probably waiting at home, wondering when he would return. The thought made him quicken his pace in finishing the tasks for the day. He wanted to get home. He wanted to see her smile and feel the warmth. A family, even if it was incomplete. On the bus ride back home, he looked at the world outside the window. People were walking quickly, cars honking, lights reflecting on the wet pavement from an earlier rain. He noticed a mother holding her child's hand and a couple laughing together. He felt a pang of longing for what he had lost, but also a sense of gratitude for what he still had. His daughter waited for him, and she needed him more than ever. That thought made his steps lighter, his heart a little less heavy. Back at the house, he was greeted with a small hug and a cheerful smile from his daughter. She ran to him, and he lifted her in his arms, feeling her tiny weight and the warmth of her body against his. "How was your day?" she asked innocently. "It was fine," he replied softly. She nodded and went off to play while he set down his bag and started dinner. The routine was simple, but comforting. The small rituals of life reminded him that the world was still moving forward, and he was part of it. As the evening fell, he tucked his daughter into bed. She held his hand and whispered that she missed her mother. He knelt by her bed and stroked her hair softly. He missed her too, he said quietly. They stayed there for a few moments in silence, letting the shared grief settle around them. Then she yawned and closed her eyes, and he turned off the light. Leaving the door slightly ajar so she could feel his presence, he sat alone in the living room for a while. Looking at old photographs on the wall, pictures of happier times when she was still there laughing, holding their daughter, smiling into the camera. He traced the outlines of their faces with his eyes, remembering voices and gestures, moments that were small but precious. He felt the familiar ache in his chest, but also a warmth that came from the memory itself. Night came and he went to bed. The house quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the soft hum of the city outside. He lay there thinking about the days to come, the challenges, the small joys, the little moments of connection that made life worth living. Even though he was lonely, even though he missed her, he felt a tiny flicker of hope that tomorrow might bring something new. And with that hope, he closed his eyes, holding on to the memory of her, the love they had shared, and the life he still had to live for their daughter. The house was still and quiet, and he let sleep take him, carrying him into dreams where she smiled and the world felt whole for just a little. While the next morning, he woke up with the same quiet feeling in the house and the familiar ache in his chest. But there was something different in the way the sunlight fell through the window. It was softer and warmer somehow, and it made him pause for a moment as he got out of bed. He heard his daughter stirring upstairs, and the sound made him smile faintly. He moved through the morning routine almost automatically, but his mind was not on bills or work or tasks. It was on the small moments of the day he had not noticed before, the way the air felt against his skin, the way the floor creaked when he walked the hallway, the way the world seemed to whisper without speaking. After breakfast, he decided to take a walk to clear his mind. The streets were quiet at this hour, with only a few people hurrying past. He kept his hands in his pockets and walked slowly, noticing the cracks in the pavement and the patterns of sunlight on the walls of the buildings. He felt a sense of calm he had not experienced in a long time. The grief was still there, but it was softer somehow, like it had been wrapped in a quiet blanket that allowed him to breathe without. The weight pressing down as he turned a corner, he saw her for the first time. She was standing near the small bakery that had just opened for the morning, holding a cup of coffee and looking down at the steam rising from it. The moment felt like it stretched forever. He noticed the curve of her smile, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she looked around the street. The soft tilt of her head as she took in the morning. It was a smile that seemed familiar and strange at the same time, and he felt something stirred deep inside him. His heart skipped a beat, and for a second he almost forgot to breathe. She looked up and their eyes met. The world seemed to narrow to just that moment. He saw kindness and warmth and a quiet happiness that made something ache inside him. It reminded him of her wife, not in a way that replaced her, but in a way that brought back memories he had kept tucked away. He looked away quickly, feeling a strange mix of longing and curiosity. She smiled again, and it was like a light passing through a window, casting patterns on the floor. He did not know her name or anything about her, but the feeling was immediate and powerful. He continued walking, but his thoughts kept returning to her. Every step he took seemed lighter and heavier at the same time. He wondered what it was about her that had captured his attention so completely. Was it the smile, or the calm presence, or the way she moved through the world without rushing yet fully? Alive, she lingered in his mind like a melody he could not forget. When he got home, he told his daughter about seeing someone new on the street. She listened with wide eyes and asked questions about what she looked like and if she was nice. He hesitated for a moment and then smiled faintly. She seemed kind and gentle, he said softly. His daughter nodded and went off to play, but he noticed the way she watched him, sometimes with a quiet curiosity, as if she knew something was shifting in his heart. The next few days he found himself taking walks at the same time, hoping to see her again. Each morning he passed the bakery, hoping that fate would bring them together, even if only for a moment. He began to notice little things about the neighborhood he had never paid attention to before, the way the sun reflected off the windows, the sounds of birds in the trees, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. Life felt more present somehow, and the weight of grief, though still there, seemed softer. One morning, she was there again. She held a small paper bag with something warm inside and smiled as she looked at a small flower growing out of a crack in the pavement. The way she observed the world with gentle attention made him want to stop and watch her for hours. He wanted to speak, but the words would not come out. Instead, he nodded quietly in her direction, and she looked up and smiled at him. That simple gesture made his chest feel full in a way he had not felt in a long time. He walked past her, slowly pretending to look at the shop windows, but he could not stop glancing back. She raised a hand slightly in greeting, and he nodded back. That small exchange made him feel lighter, as if the world had shifted slightly in his favor. He realized that it was not just her appearance, but the way she carried herself, the quiet joy in her movements, that reminded him of the life he had lost, yet also hinted at. Something new at work that day. He found it difficult to focus. Thoughts of her kept intruding as he went through emails and calls. He wondered if he would ever see her again, and what he would say if he did. He felt guilty for thinking about someone else while still mourning his wife, but he could not control the pull he felt. It was not love in the usual sense, yet it was something powerful and real. It made him feel alive again, even as he remembered the one he had lost. After work, he took the long way home. He passed the bakery and saw her sitting on a small bench outside, sipping her coffee and reading a book. The sunlight caught her hair, and the way she tilted her head as she turned the pages was mesmerizing. He stopped for a moment, unsure whether to approach or keep walking. His daughter's laughter echoed in his mind, reminding him that he needed to be present for her. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. She looked up, and their eyes met again. This time he found himself smiling without thinking. It was a smile that carried the memory of pain and the hope of something new. She returned it, and he felt a warmth spread through him. For a moment, they just looked at each other, not speaking, feeling the strange connection that had formed in silence. Then she nodded slightly in greeting and went back to her book. He walked past her, slowly feeling lighter, yet more aware of the feelings rising inside him. The encounter left a trace of happiness that lingered like the scent of flowers in spring. He thought about how much he had missed the small joys of life, and how grief had sometimes blinded him to the beauty that still existed. Seeing her smile had reminded him the world could still offer moments of unexpected light. At home, he told his daughter about the encounter. She asked if he would talk to her, and he shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he said quietly. "But we will see her again soon," she said, her voice filled with the innocent certainty of a child. He smiled at her wisdom and felt a sense of hope. He had not felt in a long time. The days passed with small exchanges of glances and smiles. Each encounter left him with a quiet joy that settled in his chest like a soft flame. He noticed details about her, the way she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the thoughtful way she held her cup, the gentle way she looked at the people around her. These small things reminded him of his wife, not in a way that replaced her, but in a way that brought back the memory of love and tenderness. One afternoon, she smiled at him for longer than usual. Their eyes met and held, and for a brief moment, the world felt still. He felt the weight of loss lift slightly, and a warmth spread through him. The memory of his wife came rushing back, but it was different now. It was not just grief, but also gratitude for having loved and been loved. He realized that the smile had reminded him of what had been beautiful and what could still be possible. He began to notice that even small gestures made a difference. The way she waved at a child on the street, the way she helped a neighbor carry groceries, the way she laughed softly at something unseen. Each moment added layers to the quiet sense of connection he felt. Life felt fuller and more textured, and the ache in his heart was still. There but mingled now with the flicker of hope and curiosity. He found himself looking forward to the walks with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. What would she say if he spoke to her? Would she remember his face? Would she notice him as he noticed her? The questions tumbled through his mind, but he also knew that he had nothing to lose by allowing himself to feel. The smile had opened a door in his heart, and he was not ready to close it yet. At night, he lay in bed thinking about the moments of the day. The memory of her smile lingered, and he felt both joy and sorrow intertwined. He thought about his daughter and how she would someday understand the complexities of love and memory. He felt gratitude for the chance to experience small happiness again, and quietly promised himself to stay open to whatever might come. He realized that the smile had not erased his grief, but had changed its shape. It was no longer a weight pressing down, but a quiet companion reminding him that life continued to move forward. There were moments of laughter, small joys, and connections waiting to be discovered. The encounter with her had reminded him that the world was larger than sorrow, and that beauty could appear unexpectedly in the everyday. The next morning, he awoke with the same feeling of anticipation. He could not explain why the thought of seeing her again filled him with warmth, but he did not question it. He prepared breakfast for his daughter, packed her lunch, and walked her to school with a lightness in his step. The city felt alive in a way it had not before. The sun reflected off windows, children laughed on the streets. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of music drifted through the air. He felt part of it all, and yet separate, aware that the smile he had seen had shifted something inside him that he could not yet name. He passed the bakery once more and saw her. She was holding a small package of bread and looking at the flowers in the window. Their eyes met, and he nodded quietly. She smiled, and for a moment the street seemed to hold its breath. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared humanity, a hint of connection that neither could fully name. He continued walking, but the warmth stayed with him long after he was out of sight. The days continued like this. Small glances, smiles, brief moments of recognition. Each encounter added a layer to the quiet anticipation growing inside him. He began to understand that life could offer healing in unexpected ways. The grief of losing his wife remained, but it had softened, mingling with the possibility of joy, hope, and new connections. The world was still the same city streets, the same work, the same house. but somehow it felt brighter, more alive, and full of potential. Evenings became moments of reflection. He watched his daughter play and remembered how small gestures and smiles had once filled the house with love. Now those same gestures from a stranger brought warmth to his heart. He knew that he was not ready to move on completely, and he did not need to. The smile had reminded him that memory and hope could coexist. He drifted to sleep with thoughts of the morning, the bakery, and the way a simple smile could shift the world inside. A person quietly and profoundly. The days after their brief encounters passed in a strange mixture of normal routine and quiet anticipation. He found himself thinking about her often during work and at home while his daughter played nearby. Every detail of her smile lingered in his mind, the gentle curve of her lips, the way her eyes seemed to catch light even on the grayest mornings, the calm warmth she carried without trying. It was not just the smile, but the feeling it left behind, a sense of peace and connection he had not experienced since. His wife had died one afternoon. He found himself sitting alone on a park bench during his lunch break. The sun filtered through the trees and the sound of children playing echoed softly in the distance. He closed his eyes and let the warmth of the sun fall on his face, remembering moments from the past. Memories of his wife came rushing in sudden flashes, the way she had tucked their daughter in at night, the small jokes they shared over morning coffee, the sound of her laughter filling the rooms of their home. The memories were sharp and tender, and he felt a lump in his throat. At the same time, he could not help thinking about her, the woman from the bakery, the one whose smile had stirred something inside him that he could not quite explain. There was a familiarity in the way she moved in the world, the quiet attentiveness in her gestures, the softness in her eyes. It reminded him of his wife, but it was not the same. She was not a replacement, she was someone entirely her own. Yet the echoes of the past seemed to ripple through the present in ways that made him ache and hope all at once. He realized that seeing her had awakened a part of himself that had been buried under grief. The world felt larger somehow, and the small moments carried weight again. A leaf falling from a tree or a bird singing in the distance no longer passed unnoticed. Every detail seemed more vivid, more alive. He began to notice things about people around him, too. The kindness in a stranger's smile, the warmth in a colleague's voice, the small courtesies that often went unseen. The encounters had changed him quietly but profoundly. That evening at home, he helped his daughter with her homework. She was animated and curious, and he found himself laughing at her small jokes and marveling at her questions. When she asked about her mother, he felt the familiar ache, but also a quiet determination to answer truthfully, without letting sorrow dominate the moment. He spoke gently about memories they shared and the love that remained. And she nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the words in her own way. He saw in her eyes the same understanding that had begun to awaken in him since he had noticed her smile as the week went on. He started taking longer walks in the mornings, sometimes wandering without direction, just to see if he might cross paths with her again. Each time he saw her, it felt as though the world shifted. Slightly, the air seemed fresher, the light brighter, and his heart lighter. He found himself studying her from a respectful distance, noting the subtleties of her expressions, the quiet kindness in her actions, and the warmth that seemed to radiate naturally from her presence. With each passing moment, the connection grew deeper, though he did not yet know her name or anything about her life. One morning he arrived at the bakery just as she was leaving. She carried a small bag and paused to adjust her scarf. Their eyes met, and she smiled in recognition. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly, and she returned the gesture. The simplicity of the exchange left him feeling full in a way words could not describe. He walked on with a strange mix of relief and longing in his chest. The memory of her smile lingered throughout the day, like a gentle echo that refused to fade at. Home, he told his daughter about the encounter in simple terms. She listened intently and asked innocent questions about the woman. "Will she be our friend?" she asked. He smiled softly and said, "Maybe we will see." Her curiosity was genuine, and he realized how much children could sense the shifts in the hearts of adults even without words. That night, he tucked his daughter into bed and lingered by the door longer than usual. He watched her sleep and felt both grief and gratitude intertwined in his chest. Grief for the past and gratitude for the small joys of the present. Days turned into weeks. He began to notice more things about her that reminded him of his wife. The way she laughed quietly when something amused her, the gentle tilt of her head when she listened intently, the softness in her hands when she carried groceries. These similarities were not exact copies, but echoes that made him think of the love he had lost. At first, the thoughts brought tears and sorrow, but gradually they also brought warmth, a sense that life was still capable of offering moments of beauty and tenderness even in the midst of pain. One afternoon, he was walking through the park and saw her sitting on a bench under a large oak tree, reading a book. He stopped at a distance, unsure whether to approach or simply observe. The way she was absorbed in the pages reminded him of quiet evenings at home when his wife had read to their daughter or to him. There was a comfort in witnessing her immersed in something she loved, and he felt a strange mixture of longing and admiration. He stood there for a moment, letting the connection form silently across the space between them. He began to understand that the feelings stirring inside him were not just nostalgia or longing. They were a recognition of something important in the present, a spark of life that grief had dimmed. Seeing her reminded him of what he had lost, but it also reminded him that the heart could still open to new experiences, to small joys, to quiet moments of connection. It was not about replacing the past, but about honoring it while allowing life to continue in its own unpredictable way. That evening at home, he found himself looking at old photographs with his daughter. They spoke softly about the memories, and she asked questions that made him reflect on the happiness they had shared. He realized that even as he noticed similarities in the woman from the bakery, he was not trying to replace anyone. He was simply noticing the continuity of love, the ways it could manifest in different forms, and the quiet power of human connection that could bring comfort and hope in times of sorrowing. The following days, he allowed himself to linger longer at the bakery, sometimes pausing to look through the window or adjusting his path so he might see her again. Each encounter was brief but meaningful, a nod, a smile, a shared glance, and with each one he felt a growing sense of calm and clarity. He started noticing the small things about himself, the way he smiled more easily, the way he found joy in simple routines, the subtle lifting of weight from his chest that had once felt impossible to release. He also noticed the way his daughter responded to the changes in him. She asked more questions and shared more stories, and he found himself listening with renewed attention. Their conversations were filled with laughter and reflection, and he realized that the quiet happiness he felt from seeing her smile had extended into other parts of his life. It was not a dramatic shift, but a subtle one, the kind that gradually reshapes a heart and teaches it to hold both grief and hope simultaneously. One morning, he passed the bakery and saw her leaving with a small bouquet of flowers in her hand. She paused and looked around the street, her gaze settling briefly on him. Their eyes met, and she smiled again, a small, warm, unspoken acknowledgement that lingered in the air. He nodded and returned the smile, feeling an unexpected lightness in his chest. The moment was fleeting, but it carried the weight of connection and the promise of something more to come. He continued walking, but the warmth stayed with him long after he turned the corner. The memory of that smile stayed with him. Throughout the day, he thought about how grief could be transformed by small acts of kindness and recognition, how a glance or a gesture could awaken dormant parts of the heart. He realized that life was teaching him to balance the past with the present, to honor memories, while also embracing the small joys that appeared unexpectedly. The experience was gentle, yet powerful, reshaping his understanding of love and loss. That evening, he prepared dinner with his daughter. They talked about school and friends and the small details of the day. He noticed the way her laughter filled the room and the way she leaned against him while stirring her food. The warmth in their home felt deeper and richer than it had in months. He realized that seeing her smile at the bakery had not just affected him in isolation, it had influenced how he approached every interaction with care and attention, how he held the people he loved closer, how he noticed the beauty in ordinary moments. Late at night, he sat by the window drinking tea and thought about the unfolding days. The memory of her smile mingled with the memory of his wife in a way that brought both comfort and longing. He felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope as he reflected on the strange ways life could offer healing. He understood that the grief would always be part of him, but now it was joined by a gentle light that allowed him to breathe more freely, to love more openly, and to notice the small wonders of the world with renewed eyes. The week ended with another encounter. He saw her crossing the street with a child by her side, her smile directed at the small child as she helped him navigate the curb. He felt a surge of admiration and warmth seeing her gentle attention. The scene reminded him of the tenderness he had once witnessed in his wife, and he felt that. It's a delicate blending of past and present that had become a quiet rhythm in his life. He walked on with a soft smile on his face, knowing that life had offered him a small gift. A reminder of love in its many forms. As he lay in bed that night, he reflected on the changes stirring within him. The woman from the bakery had become a symbol not of replacement, but of hope, a living reminder that the heart could expand to hold memory and new experiences together. He felt gratitude for the small moments of recognition, the brief interactions, the quiet smiles that lingered and transformed ordinary days into something subtly extraordinary. The ache of loss was still present, but it was joined by light, warmth, and the possibility of connection. Sleep came slowly yet peacefully that night. He dreamed of moments past and moments yet to come, of the laughter of his daughter and the gentle presence of the woman who had reminded him of the beauty in small gestures. He realized that life was moving forward and that he had a choice to open his heart while honoring what had been. The delicate balance between memory and hope had begun, and he understood that the smile he had witnessed was not just a fleeting moment, but a doorway to something quietly transformative. The morning sun spilled softly through the curtains, and he stretched, his arms feeling the quiet warmth in the room. The house felt peaceful and alive in a different way than before, the kind of peace that came after weeks of small, unnoticed changes in the heart. His daughter was still asleep, and he watched her for a moment, her chest rising and falling with each breath. He smiled faintly, thinking about how much had shifted in his life. The new awareness he carried, the small light that had entered the days since he had first seen her smile. He prepared breakfast quietly, moving with a rhythm he had rediscovered over time. The sounds of cooking and the smell of fresh bread seemed to fill the space in a way that reminded him of the old days. His daughter emerged from her room, rubbing her eyes, and he knelt to greet her. They ate together, talking about little things that mattered to a child, but often brought him unexpected laughter. In these moments, he realized that life had a way of weaving joy back into the routine of ordinary days. After breakfast, he decided to take a walk through the park. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled fresh after an early morning rain. He let his mind wander as he walked, feeling the gentle rhythm of his steps and the soft breeze against his face. His thoughts kept returning to her, the woman from the bakery whose smile had shifted something inside him. He wondered if she would be out today, if fate would offer another small moment of recognition and connection. As he neared the familiar bench under the large oak tree, he saw her again. She was there, reading a small book and holding a cup of coffee, the sunlight catching the strands of her hair. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave a small smile that made his chest feel warm and light. This time he felt ready to speak, to move beyond the quiet recognition and step into conversation. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her, and offered a gentle greeting. She looked up and nodded, setting the book aside. There was an ease in her expression, a quiet welcome that made him feel comfortable. They spoke briefly at first about the weather, about the park, about small, ordinary things that somehow felt important in the moment. Every word exchanged carried a weight of understanding, a recognition that both had noticed each other without words before. The conversation was simple, yet meaningful, and he felt the strange comfort of shared presence. Over the next few days, they began to speak more often. Small encounters at the park or outside the bakery became moments of exchange where laughter and thoughtful observation intertwined. He learned that she had a gentle curiosity about the world, a kindness in her gestures that reminded him of what had been precious in the past. He began to share small stories about his daughter, about ordinary life, and she listened with attentiveness and warmth. In these moments, he felt a sense of connection that was deep yet unspoken, the kind that grows slowly and quietly over time. He noticed how much these conversations were changing him. He felt lighter, more open, more willing to notice beauty in small gestures and everyday moments. The grief that had once been heavy and all-consuming now coexisted with moments of joy. Small flickers of hope that reminded him that life could hold both sorrow and happiness at the same time. He realized that he was not trying to replace the past, but allowing himself to move forward while honoring. One afternoon, they walked together through the park, watching children play and listening to the soft hum of life around them. He found himself speaking about memories of his wife, the way she had laughed and loved and cared for their daughter. It was difficult to voice the thoughts aloud, but he felt a strange trust in her presence, a sense that she would understand without judgment. She listened quietly, nodding, offering soft acknowledgement that made the memories feel less heavy, more like shared warmth than unbearable loss. As the days passed, he found himself noticing her in more subtle ways. The tilt of her head when she listened, the way her hands moved as she spoke, the soft laughter that emerged without effort. These small details carried a resonance that reminded him of his wife, but also affirmed that she was her own person, independent and complete. He began to understand that the heart could hold multiple connections without diminishing the love that had been lost. He also noticed changes in himself. He smiled more freely, laughed more easily, and felt a presence in the world he had not experienced in months. The small conversations and gentle moments of connection had reshaped his perception of ordinary days. He began to see opportunities for joy and tenderness in places he had overlooked before. The world felt alive again, rich with possibility, and he walked through it with a quiet awareness that each moment could carry meaning. One evening he brought his daughter to the park, where he had first seen her reading. They sat together on a bench and watched the sunset paint the sky in warm colors. His daughter asked questions about the woman he had mentioned, and he spoke softly about kindness and the beauty of small gestures. She listened attentively, her eyes wide with curiosity, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for being able to share these lessons about love and connection. The park seemed to hold a quiet magic that evening, a space where past and present could coexist peacefully as weeks passed. The encounters became more frequent and the conversations more personal. They shared stories about family, childhood memories, and small dreams. He realized that he could speak about his grief openly without fear of being judged, and that in turn allowed him to notice the joy in the present. The bond they were forming was gentle and unforced, a quiet unfolding that neither rushed nor pushed. Simply allowing connection to deepen naturally, he began to reflect on how much he had changed since the first smile. The weight of loss was still present, but it had softened, mingled now with hope and the possibility of new experiences. He understood that grief and joy could coexist, and that the heart could expand to hold both simultaneously. The woman had not replaced his wife, but had reminded him of the beauty and tenderness that still existed in the world. He felt grateful for the small gifts of recognition, warmth, and connection that had quietly transformed his days. One afternoon, they found themselves walking along a quiet street after picking up coffee. She spoke about the little things that brought her joy, the simple pleasures of observing the world and noticing details often overlooked. He listened and realized how much he had forgotten to notice these things in the past, how consumed he had been by grief and routine. The conversation was light, yet meaningful, each word carrying the weight of human experience and the quiet beauty of connection. He began to notice a shift in his own behavior. He was more patient with his daughter, more attentive to the small details of her life. He laughed more freely, even at minor mistakes or accidents that might have frustrated him before. The presence of someone who offered understanding and warmth reminded him that life could still be full of meaningful moments. He felt a sense of balance he had not known since his wife had passed, a delicate equilibrium between past loss and present possibility. One evening, after dinner, he found himself reflecting on the unfolding days. The woman had become a symbol not of replacement but of hope, a reminder that the heart could still open to connection, kindness, and quiet joy. He realized that he had begun to trust life again, to allow himself to notice beauty in ordinary moments and to engage with the world without fear. The grief was still present but softened, A companion rather than a weight, he also began to notice changes in the way his daughter responded to him. She laughed more often, asked more questions, and shared more stories. He realized that the quiet lightness he felt had extended into other parts of his life, shaping interactions and creating space for joy and tenderness to flourish. The simple exchanges with the woman had ripple effects, reminding him that small gestures and attention could have profound impacts on the lives. Around him, one afternoon, they sat on a bench together, watching a group of children playing nearby. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and the air carried the faint scent of flowers. He spoke softly about his daughter and the joys and challenges of raising her alone. She listened attentively, offering gentle encouragement and understanding. The connection between them deepened, not through dramatic gestures, but through quiet presence, attentive listening, and shared humanity over time. He began to notice that the past and present could coexist. Memories of his wife could arise without overwhelming sorrow, and moments with the woman could bring joy without guilt. The two threads of experience wove together, creating a richer, more textured understanding of love, loss, and the possibilities of human connection. He felt gratitude for the chance to notice this balance, to move forward while honoring what had been. The week ended with another encounter at the bakery. She smiled at him as she exited, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Their eyes met and lingered for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of shared presence and understanding. He nodded and returned the smile, feeling a quiet warmth spread through him. The moment was fleeting yet meaningful. A small affirmation that life could offer connection, tenderness, and the possibility of new beginnings without erasing the past. As he walked home that evening, he reflected on the quiet transformation unfolding in his life. The grief was no longer all-consuming. It had softened into a gentle companion that reminded him of love, memory, and the beauty of life. The small exchanges, the shared smiles, and the attentive presence of someone who understood had reshaped his heart. He felt hope, not as a loud or insistent force, but as a gentle light guiding him forward. At home, he tucked his daughter into bed and lingered by the door, watching her sleep. He reflected on the small joys of the day, the subtle shifts in his heart, and the way connection could heal without replacing what had been lost. Sleep came gently that night, carrying him into dreams where past and present coexisted, where love remained both memory and possibility, and where the quiet warmth of human connection offered solace and hope. Morning arrived quietly in the small house, with light spilling softly through the windows. He woke slowly, feeling the calm that had begun to settle over his life. The house no longer felt empty in the same way. There was a rhythm to the days, a gentle unfolding that had started when he had first noticed her smile. His daughter lay beside him, still asleep, and he watched her for a moment, feeling a swell of love and gratitude. Life had shifted subtly but profoundly in ways he could not have anticipated. He prepared breakfast with care, noticing the smell of fresh coffee and the warmth of the kitchen. His daughter came down, rubbing her eyes, and he greeted her with a smile. They spoke quietly about the plans for the day, and he realized how much these small routines had begun to hold significance. They were more than chores or tasks. There were moments of connection, small gestures of care that reminded him of the love that persisted. Even after breakfast, he decided to walk to the park. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the subtle scent of flowers and damp earth. He felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet hope that he might see her again. He walked slowly, noticing the way the sunlight fell through the trees, the soft chatter of birds, and the gentle movements of people going about their mornings. Each step seemed to hold meaning, as though the world itself was guiding him forward. He found her sitting under the familiar oak tree, her cup of coffee steaming softly in the morning air. She looked up and their eyes met. This time there was no hesitation, no distance. He approached her slowly, and she smiled warmly, a smile that seemed to say welcome without words. They began to talk casually about small things, the kind of conversation that feels effortless and comfortable. The sound of her voice was calming and familiar, and he felt a quiet joy in simply being present with her. They walked together through the park, observing the world around them. Children played, Dogs ran past, chasing balls, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of life. He spoke softly about his daughter, about the small joys and challenges of raising her alone. She listened with attentiveness and empathy, offering words of understanding that made him feel seen in a way he had not felt in a long time. The connection between them deepened, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of presence as the days passed. Their interactions became more frequent. They shared stories about their lives, about small dreams and quiet reflections. He found himself opening up about his grief in ways he had not allowed himself before. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and acknowledgement that helped him process the memories of his wife. The grief remained, but it was no longer suffocating. It had softened into something he could carry alongside new experiences. Allowing him to feel both sorrow and hope simultaneously, one afternoon they sat on a bench watching a group of children play nearby. He noticed the subtle movements of her hands, the tilt of her head when she listened, and the warmth in her eyes. He realized how much these small details reminded him of his wife. Not as a replacement, but as echoes of love and kindness that had shaped his life. The realization brought both tears and a smile. Life had offered him a chance to honor the past while embracing the present. He also noticed changes in himself. He was more patient with his daughter, more attentive to the world around him, and more willing to engage with life fully. The quiet exchanges with her had sparked a subtle transformation, teaching him that the heart could expand to hold multiple forms of love without diminishing any of them. He felt lighter, more present, and more capable of noticing beauty and connection in ordinary moments. In an evening, he prepared dinner with his daughter. The conversation flowed easily, and laughter filled the room. He realized that the warmth he had begun to feel extended beyond his encounters with her, touching every aspect of his life. The small shifts in perception, the renewed attention to kindness and detail, and the capacity to feel joy had created a ripple effect, shaping how he approached relationships and moments of daily life. After dinner, he took a quiet moment alone. He reflected on how far he had come from the early days of grief, when every moment felt heavy and the house seemed empty. The memory of his wife remained vivid, but it was joined now by the warmth and light he felt in the presence of someone who offered understanding and connection. He realized that life had a way of gently guiding the heart toward healing through small, meaningful encounters. He began to notice the subtle joy in small rituals. Morning walks, preparing breakfast, reading stories to his daughter, watching the world in the park carried a quiet significance. The woman had reminded him that life could hold moments of beauty and tenderness, even in the aftermath of loss. Every interaction with her, every shared smile, had reinforced the understanding that grief and hope could coexist one day. They walked along the quiet streets after leaving the park. She spoke about the things that made her happy, the small pleasures of everyday life, and the moments of kindness she had noticed in others. He listened attentively, realizing how much he had forgotten to notice these details in the past. Her perspective offered a gentle reminder that the world was filled with subtle wonders waiting to be seen, appreciated, and shared. He also found himself reflecting on his own growth. The interactions had taught him patience, empathy, and the importance of presence. He felt more attuned to his daughter's needs and more capable of embracing the beauty in ordinary life. The quiet joy he had experienced was not a replacement for the love he had lost, but an expansion of his capacity to feel, notice, and connect. Evenings became times of reflection and gratitude. He watched his daughter sleep, thinking about how much he had learned about resilience, love, and the human heart. He understood that healing did not mean forgetting or moving on too quickly. It meant holding memories with care while allowing space for new connections to flourish. The balance was delicate, but possible, and he felt grateful for the guidance life had offered through the quiet presence of someone who understood.